Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Chris Sost, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Chris with the Gig Economy Lounge. Today's episode is all about tips on getting tips if you're a rideshare driver. In particular, this is really for you. There's a whole host of ideas out there, and I just wanted to put out my thoughts on this. Not to say that it's better than anybody else's, but it's been, my experience over time that's led me to create this list. I will preface this by saying you will get more tips if you've got zero expectations of others, because there's no way you can be disappointed at that point. I read a lot on social about people expecting tips or wanting tips to be built into rides. And to be quite honest with you, if you build a tip into the ride, like if you make tipping mandatory, it's no longer a tip. It's no longer gratuity. It's just a new fixed cost built into the price. When it comes to luggage, first of all, the reason why I am putting people's luggage in my car is because I don't want any scratches on my car. People do not respect your vehicle as much as you respect it. So that's number one. But number two, people that are older, people that have challenges with mobility, ladies, gentlemen, any of those people, I'm going to go ahead and help out as much as I can and just be a decent person. I'm not looking for a tip. It's just something that I was raised to do as a kid, regardless of whether I'm getting paid to do a job or not. So now that we got, those two things out of the way, I firmly believe in the KISS methodology. Keep it simple, stupid, or keep it simple, silly. However you want to put that last word is up to you. Less is more. So, in my car, I've tried a whole host of different setups in my cars over the years. I've had LED lights on the inside. I've had tip signs. I've had tip boxes. I've had rating signs. I've had, water, candy, you name it. And I've had it in my car. And what I've found outside of when I was working, in a predominantly college area, those signs and everything else didn't necessarily lead to greater tips. So for me, it's keeping it simple. My car setup right now is about as simple as it gets. There's an Uber beacon in the front windshield, and there is a power pod on the back of my passenger seat that has one lightning cable, one USB-C, and one micro USB that all retract back into their casing that plugs into the cigarette lighter. That's it. That's all that's in the car. I just keep it super clean, and I get more tips now than I've ever gotten in the past. And I wanted to kind of like reverse engineer it. So I started paying attention to what I was doing. And one of the things that I found was I was asking more questions as people were getting in the car. This was particular to when I was picking them up at a hotel or I was picking them up at their house and taking them to the airport. I got the conversation started outside of the car while I was loading the luggage. Reading the person's body language also will go a hell of a long way to understanding, the kind of ride that they would like. Now, Uber just released an update today for black SUV, which will allow passengers to put in their ride preference, whether it's like quiet mode or talkative mode, like give you kind of like cues like, hey, this person doesn't want to fucking hear your life story when you're taking them wherever you're going. I hope, which I know they won't, but I hope that they roll that out to other platforms, because I think that this would go a long way in just increasing the experience for everybody. Like if you know somebody doesn't want to hear you talk, it would be really awesome to know that in advance. So besides reading the person's body language, the one thing that I found is light sense is great in your car. So, air freshener is cool, just not heavy, not like in your face. Like people shouldn't get in like choking on the scent, like it's just not good. People have, all kinds of breathing issues out there. There's people with asthma. There's a whole host of things that could, potentially trigger a breathing event. I would err on the side of a light scent or a light fragrance rather than a heavy scent or a heavy fragrance. I actually prefer verbal cues over posted signs. Like I said, I've had tip signs, I've had rating signs, I've had all kinds of signs in my car over the time period. What I've found that works best is verbal cues along the way. Nothing works better for 5 stars than when they're getting out of the car, you just thank them for being a 5-star passenger. Sounds really cheesy. Sounds super fucking cheesy. It works. I don't know why, I don't know how, but it works. I usually find a way to wiggle in the conversation. I've actually been getting a lot of tips and ratings before the end of the ride, just through, asking them, what's their experience with Uber or Lyft? Like tell me your craziest. We always know that the riders ask us, what's the craziest ride you've ever had? I like to flip it back the other way and ask them. That way I can gauge where we are on our ride. After that, knowing your target rider type and playing to it. So if you drive in a college town or you drive in a college area, know your target rider type and play to them. I actually still do it to this day. So when I go out and if I'm going to work the bar crowd, which I rarely do it now, but if I work 2 a.m. bar closing, this is going to sound really silly, but I'll literally bring a Bop It with me. The game Bop It. Google it if you've never heard of it, but you'd be surprised how intoxicated adults turn into like 6-year-old kids with that game, and it keeps them preoccupied and it makes the rides a lot better. I think you can pick one up at like Target or whatever, like they're like 10, 12 bucks. I don't know, maybe 15. I don't know how much they're costing these days. But if you do work that crowd, it's a great tool. It keeps them focused on something other than puking. It will keep them focused on something that's not moving so they won't get motion sickness. I mean, it just, if you don't like dealing with drunk people, it'll keep them preoccupied from bugging you. There's a whole lot of things that go behind having a Bop It or some kind of, handheld game, but that I bought it one day and it really worked a couple years ago. So, your target riders could be college students, could be the bar crowd, business travelers. Now, this is the group that I cater to. I drive during the times and in the areas where business travelers are most likely to be, which is why my car is just clean, crisp, and doesn't have a whole hell of a lot going on in it. I have found that to work best with business travelers. There's people that go to and from work. There's parents with kids. The list goes on. If you find yourself picking up one group more than the other, or if you find yourself, if you drive, if you split your day up and you drive early mornings and then in the afternoons or in the evenings, you can play to both sides of the coin, right? So in the morning, you're picking up, people going to work and business travelers. So your car is cleaned out, no signs, catering towards the business or workers going to work or going to the airport. When you're working in the evening times or working the late night crowds, chances are you're going to be running into college students, people going to the bars, people coming back from restaurants out with their significant others or their friends. You know who you're running into, and you can play to both crowds, or all the crowds that you run into, I should say. And I would just end with this. I would exhaust all other options before adding things like candy or any kind of other external amenities that actually cost any kind of money. Water, obviously cool because, especially if you live in Florida, that's a nice value add, especially if you're driving during the daytime. The crowd that I drive and the times that I drive don't lend myself needing to give things like, water or anything like that. But I would say hold that as a very last resort. I would check everything else that you're doing first before getting into that. Personally, I've never not tipped, a rideshare driver or, given a rideshare driver a bad rating, but I've gotten in some cars to where it was like overload. Like there was a shit all over the place. Don't get me wrong. It was all for the passengers, but I was just like, fuck, man. I felt like I was either in like Toys R Us or like a mall setting or Ross. I didn't quite know how to feel. Like all I'm trying to do is get down the road, man. I don't need all this shit in my face. But that's just my personal view. Like I said, I didn't necessarily hold it against them, but I can see how, passengers that aren't drivers hold it against you. These are just, things that I wanted to throw out there. If you're a new driver, if you're an old driver, it doesn't matter what kind of driver you are or when you started. It's nice to kind of review some of the things that we may or may not have continued to do over the years as rideshare drivers that may increase, your tips. If nothing else, doing these things will go a long way in and you just having a better experience as a driver, right? Because at the end of the day, you can have, $20, $30 in tips that day and go home super pissed off, or, you can have $15 in tips or more because you're enjoying yourselves and have a stress-free experience driving. And with that, I'm going to get the heck off of here. I didn't want to make this too long. Thank you guys for checking this out. If you are seeing this on YouTube, you can click the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. If you are seeing this anywhere else or hearing this anywhere else, you can click like, subscribe, or anything like that wherever you are on that platform. Thank you very much, and have a great one, guys.